The lost key. It was the one thing Emily needed to get her day back on track, her car keys. But after hours of searching, there was no sign of them. When all hope seemed lost, something unexpected happened that would make her question everything she thought she knew. A sudden change in routine. It was a quiet Friday evening in a small town in Ohio when Emily realized her keys were missing. She had just finished a long week at work and was looking forward to a relaxing weekend. But now, standing in the dim light of her kitchen, she found herself in a panic. She had spent the last hour searching every corner of the house, retracing her steps, but the keys were nowhere to be found. They weren't in her bag, they weren't on the kitchen counter, and they weren't on the hall table where she usually left them. The only thing left was to call it a night, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. For the past few months, life had been difficult for Emily. Her mother had been ill, and she had spent much of her time caring for her. Between work and looking after her mother, Emily's own health had taken a back seat. She hadn't realized how much the stress had built up until this moment. As she stood there, feeling defeated, Emily began to pray. It wasn't something she did often, but in the quiet of the moment, it felt like the right thing to do. A strange sense of calm. "God, I don't know what to do anymore," she whispered, almost to herself. "I'm tired, and I feel lost. Please show me a sign that things are going to be okay." She sat down on the couch, her head in her hands. The weight of the world seemed to press down on her, and she closed her eyes, just for a moment, to clear her thoughts. The house was still, save for the hum of the refrigerator in the background. But then, as if by divine intervention, something strange happened. A sense of calm washed over her. It wasn't something she could explain, but it felt like the weight of her worries had momentarily lifted. Suddenly, Emily's eyes opened. She didn't know why, but she felt drawn to look toward the kitchen table, a place she had already searched several times. The keys. Sitting right there, in plain sight. The mysterious placement of the keys. Confused, Emily walked over to the table. The keys were there, just as she had left them earlier that morning. She felt an overwhelming sense of peace, mixed with disbelief. She had searched the table thoroughly, so how had they appeared there now? It was almost as though they had been placed there, and she knew she hadn't done it herself. For a moment, she just stared at the keys, trying to make sense of what had happened. She had been so certain they weren't there before. Had she simply missed them? Or was something more at play? The longer she stood there, the more she realized that it wasn't just about finding the keys. It was about what that moment represented, an answer to her prayer, a reassurance that despite the chaos in her life, she wasn't alone. The keys were more than just a lost object. They were a symbol, a small but significant reminder that things would get better. Life would move forward, and she would find her way through it. A divine reminder. As Emily picked up the keys, she felt a renewed sense of hope. It was as though a divine hand had reached into her life, offering her comfort when she needed it most. She didn't know how the keys had ended up back on the table, but she knew one thing for certain: it wasn't just a coincidence. It was a sign that she was being watched over, and that everything would fall into place in due time. Emily took a deep breath and smiled, feeling the weight of her burdens lighten. It wasn't the resolution of all her problems, but it was enough for her to keep moving forward. The missing keys had returned, and so had a sense of peace she hadn't realized she had lost. She was no longer alone in her struggles. She had been given a sign, a small but powerful reminder that divine intervention was closer than she had ever imagined. A newfound faith. That night, Emily couldn't help but think about the strange occurrence. It had been a simple thing, just a set of keys, but it had felt so much more. She realized that this moment, however small, had changed her perspective. It had reminded her of the importance of faith, of taking a moment to stop, breathe, and trust that things would work out, even when they seemed impossible. As she went to bed that night, she thanked God for the calm that had washed over her and for the reminder that, even in the midst of hardship, there was always hope. The keys were just a sign, a message that she was being guided, even when she couldn't see the way forward. And for the first time in a long while, Emily finally felt at peace.